All right, so for this next topic, we're going to bring up a comment from one of our listeners, Daniel Sanoa. He brought up a potential Max Scherzer trade to the Padres, and I was really intrigued by it. Isaac, I know you were as well, but how do you think the Padres would look if they added a guy like Max Scherzer? And we'll talk about what it would cost and kind of where everyone would move around and stuff. But just initial thoughts, Max Scherzer gets traded to the Padres. What would your initial reaction be?
I think Daniel said it best. We don't need starting pitching, but any contender in the MLB could use a guy like Max Scherzer. Matt and I were talking about it right now. How we think the rotation would look like this. Darvish 1, Scherzer 2. I could imagine it'd be Snell at 3, but I mean, I think we prefer Musgrove 3. Keep him there. Snell down at 4, and then Lamet down at 5, and then you move. This is my favorite aspect of this whole, Max Scherzer trade. You move Ryan Weathers to the bullpen, and let's say your bullpen is depleted. Palm is down right now. Let's say I don't know, uh, Melanson needs a rest, right? You have Ryan Weathers come in, throw innings 7 through 9, and they're going to be almost immaculate innings because Ryan Weathers is really good out of the bullpen. We saw him come out of the bullpen earlier in the year and have a save because he threw 3 really good innings after a Musgrove start. So that's kind of like my favorite aspect of this whole Max Scherzer thing is if you move Ryan Weathers to the bullpen and the bullpen needs a rest, Ryan Weathers is there to provide that. And it's not like right now where the Padres have been going to Nabil Chrismat or as another one, Miggy Diaz. They're going to Ryan Weathers, a top 6, top 5 prospect in our farm system. So that would be huge. And if you think Max Scherzer is maybe a little washed, no, like he's still pitching super strong. He has a 2.2 ERA with I think he's like 5-4, something like that. So he's still pitching really strong. And if you get Max Scherzer to go against, because we got to think about it like this: the Dodgers, if we play them, because realistically, if we make the playoffs and if the Dodgers make the playoffs, let's say the Dodgers are the wild card and we win the division. Realistically, they're gonna line up like they did it in the regular season. They're gonna line up Bueller, Bauer, Kershaw, and this is probably gonna be a 5-game series in the NLDS. They're gonna line up those first 3. So we need to be able to combat that with Darvish, Scherzer, and then if you want Snell, because Snell did pitch very good against the Dodgers recently, so whatever, credit to Blake Snell, I guess. But that would be huge. That'd be a huge trade. You need to be able to, anytime you can add somebody like Max Scherzer, even if you don't need him, and that's what the Dodgers did with Trevor Bauer. They didn't need him, but they got him, and now he's probably their. I think has the highest ERA in their rotation. Same thing with Mookie. They had Verdugo, who was doing very well, but they got Mookie, who's even better. Any upgrades you can make to the roster is necessary, really.
I definitely think that it's one of those moves where maybe it's not a need. And we were talking about the bats just in our recap right now and saying, hey, they're really struggling. So I would still expect them to make a move for a bat or two or whatever the case is there. But the Scherzer move, and this is something that Daniel brought up as well. If the Padres don't get him, the Dodgers are going to get him. The Giants are going to get him. One of these other teams is going to get him. And maybe that team is in the NL. Teams will make moves that teams that have a lot of money, like the Dodgers, are going to go and make a move for a guy like this and have this bold move where it's like, all right, we're going to just get richer and richer and richer. That's what we're going to do. We're going to just keep building our starting rotation, and we're going to have just an extremely good 1 through 5. If the Padres really, really, really want to win a World Series this year, I think this is one of the best moves they can make. Because if you look at where they're at, and we were talking about how their offense has been so stagnant, they are still 10th in runs scored. And then they have the best starting rotation, not the best starting rotation, but they have the best pitching ERA in the whole sport right now. If you add Scherzer as your 2, that makes it that much better. So you're getting your rotation a lot stronger, and you're also not going to allow a different team to go make their rotation a lot better because there's a good chance that Scherzer would get moved. He's 36 years old. He has half a year left on his deal. And I think the big question from the Padres' point of view is how much would it cost to give up? And are the Padres in a situation where they can make a move like this? We know that baseball doesn't have a salary cap, but teams are restricted by how much liquidity they have. And in the Padres case, there was an article I remember, I want to say it was a year or 2 ago, where they were like, where is the Padres money coming from? Because basically they just kept signing guys and signing guys, and it was international signings. Just so much money was being spent, and it was so much different than the old Padres. If they're still trying to go on that path and they're trying to really build up the Padres brand, build around guys like Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, and Yu Darvish, because Yu Darvish is one of the biggest international stars in the sport. If they're really trying to do that, then I think this is a great move. This is a great way to push all your chips into this year. And he's not going to cost a ton. Like, I think normally when you think of, oh, if you acquire Max Scherzer, you're going to have to sell the farm for him. But acquiring for half a year of Max Scherzer is a lot different. So this is definitely a short-term, let's win now kind of move. But I expect the Padres to have a mixture of win now moves and then future moves. And we've seen what they've done where they'll acquire a guy and then they'll also get a prospect that's not really highly thought of. I mean, we've seen that many, many times in the past. So I would expect if they did move for Scherzer, they'd probably have something small attached to it that you should always notice in the Padres trades because you don't know what it could turn into. And that's a good thing. But I really think that this is just a really interesting topic to bring up because, yes, Scherzer is not a need, but he'll sure as hell help this team win. And you want that guy on the mound. If you go into a playoff series and it's a 5-game, let's say it's a 5-game series with the Mets and it's DeGrom and Syndergaard, who do you want out there to match those guys? You want Darvish and Scherzer because those guys are going to hang, and that is going to be just competitive baseball where what you're doing is you're banking on your bats, your star bats, Fernando Tatis in the playoffs to have him come up with those big hits against the aces, and you have your ace on the mound kind of combating those other guys. So I love it. I think it's a really cool idea. But Isaac, I guess my question to you is, do you think the Padres are in a spot where, and like we said, we'll get into the value, like to kind of wrap it up, but do you think they're in a spot to spend this kind of money? I mean, we don't really know exactly, but do you think that that's kind of their mindset right now is like, let's go win this thing?
I mean, in my opinion, it should be. I get it. You don't want to sell your whole farm. And I don't, like Matt said, I don't think you would have to sell the whole farm for Max Scherzer. He is on the last, he's going to be on the back end of his last year of his deal. He's a lot of money. I think he's like 26 million on the current payroll. But I think the Padres are in a perfect spot to be able to make a move like this. Even if it's not for Max Scherzer, but being able to trade for a huge, big time outfield bat like Jesse Winker, like we brought up in our trade episode. But if it is Max Scherzer, they're absolutely in a position to do this. They've shown the willingness to win. AJ Pillar's shown the willingness to spend money, the willingness to move on from mid-tier prospects, which, like we brought up, we think they're very replaceable. Tucupita's very replaceable. Onya's replaceable. All those guys in that range, I'd say 8 and on, are replaceable prospects. And, the Padres have prospects like Victor Acosta, who's still very young, but he's probably going to end up top 5 in our prospect rankings very soon, maybe by next year or the following year. So, Preller's very good at finding those prospects. It's not a problem to be able to get rid of guys like Tucupita. But I think, another advantageous thing to this whole Scherzer thing is that we've brought up a lot that the bullpen has been depleted. Top 5 in bullpen innings pitched. Well, Max Scherzer is averaging 6.5 innings a game. So let's say you go Darvish and then you go Scherzer. Now you have 2 guys who are probably averaging 6 innings a game, and then maybe as the 5th starter, Lamet goes 5 or 6, and then you have Weathers finish the game. You know how beneficial that would be to the bullpen, getting guys like Pomeranz healthy, because Pomeranz is probably our best reliever. You get him healthy, and you get him throwing not as many innings as he probably would be before this kind of trade. This team is set up perfectly for October. This team is set up to win, and to win this year. Because you think about it, we were supposed to go into this year with Mike Clevenger. Well, now instead of Mike Clevenger, you're going in with Max Scherzer. And then next year you got Clevenger back instead of Max Scherzer. So it's kind of like a switch off, I guess, kind of thing. But this would be huge. I think this would be a huge trade for the Padres. And obviously we're not saying it's going to happen. We're not saying it's super realistic. I do think it's realistic. We're not saying it's crazy realistic. But, it's just, we like talking about trades. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to think of Max Scherzer on our team.
Yeah, and I like that you kind of bring up how it's going to be Clev next year, but this is like that half-year rental. I think for a starting pitcher, it makes sense to go get that guy for half a season because you have the guys that you want to be the future rotation. You have that set. But when you're making a push for the championship, that's a big move. In terms of trading for an outfield bat or an infield bat or whatever it is, an additional bat, I think that's where you go for the more control. That's one of the big reasons why we really like the potential move for Jesse Winker, because he has 3 years left. But this is a move where you need that half year from a guy, because that's the thing. Like you brought up Club. I think that's a perfect example of how he kind of is going to go and fill that role that Scherzer had this. Hopefully, will have this postseason for the Padres. But I think in terms of value, you don't think it's going to be something over the top, right? Because you're trading for a third. Yes, he's a very, very good starting pitcher. I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer, but I feel like he'll at least be talked about a little bit in that regard, because he has had a dominant career. He's been a star pitcher for many, many years. But this is probably the lowest he will ever could be moved for. And it's not a performance thing. He's 36 years old, and the Washington Nationals I think they're in 4th or 5th place right now. Maybe they come back up. That would kind of be something you'd have to monitor in this move. But if they're not ready to win right now, and they're trying to build up a better team for Juan Soto and those guys to make a run down the road, because they won the World Series 2 years ago, but last year they weren't that great, and this year they haven't been that great. And if they're trying to kind of retool a little bit for the future, I think it's a good move for the Nationals to move on from him, lose that half year, because what are they really gaining from hanging on the Scherzer? Not much, which is unfortunate for them. But I just think it's one of those things where you can trade them some young pieces. You can trade them some prospects, and maybe there's a couple guys they really like. Maybe they like a guy like Onya. So I don't know who it would be that they would trade, but I don't think it's going to take some top-end guy to move for a guy like Max Scherzer. Definitely a pretty penny you're going to have to pay him in terms of salary, but also it's nice that you have only half a year to pay him. So you're not going to pay that full salary. I think, what did you say, it was like 27 million, I believe it was. So maybe around 12 to 13 is probably what they would end up paying him. I'm not exactly sure how the MLB salary works in terms of if you get traded around the deadline, but I really like the move. Do you think it would cost a lot though, or do you think I'm around kind of right on the value?
I think you're right on the value. The Nationals can't be picky. I just checked right now. They have coming into the season. They had the 30th ranked farm system in all of baseball, and even through all the moves we have made in terms of trading our prospects, we're still number 6. So we got a lot to give them. We have a lot to offer. And you brought up what are they going to get out of Max Scherzer? Well, you're absolutely right. They're not winning right now, and you could bring up that whole World Series that they won, where they were last. I believe they were last going into the All-Star break, and then they ended up winning it all. But that stuff's like 1 in 1,000. I don't think they'll do that again. I really don't see that happening.
I feel like the only other team I saw do that was the Cardinals, like many, many years ago, where they came into September, they were 10 games back, and then they made it into the playoffs on that final day, and then they ended up winning the World Series that year. But you're right, that rarely happens.
Yeah, I don't see that happening again. And they need to get Juan Soto some pieces. They cannot pull a Mike Trout on that dude. That dude is way too good to do that to him. They need to get pieces from us that they want. Well, from anyone in general, because like I said, Mike Trout has been on the Angels for far too long. Poor guy has only made the playoffs once, I believe, and he's possibly the greatest baseball player to ever live. When you're thinking about 5-tool players, but in terms of this whole Scherzer Padres thing, we have plenty to give them, and this would put us over the top. This would easily be the best rotation in baseball. I don't even think it'd be close. You brought up, who do you want pitching against DeGrom? Well, I know who I want pitching against DeGrom. It's either going to be Scherzer or Darvish. I'd probably say Scherzer, but for sure either Scherzer or Darvish. I brought up that going into a series against the Dodgers, who do you want pitching against Buehler? Darvish. Who do you want pitching against Kershaw? Scherzer. I mean, this is a win-win situation. I think we give them some mid-tier prospects that would probably be top-end prospects in their farm system, and we take on the rest of his salary. And then whatever, he's gone next year, we get back Clevenger. It's going to be perfectly fine for us.
Yeah, I'm all for it. And also, I think this will probably wrap it up right here. But let us know what you think. If you think this is just a bad idea, you're wasting it for a half year of control. I understand that argument, because if you're trading for half years of guys, like, it doesn't always work out. We saw that last year with Mitch Moreland. He was balling out. The Padres go and trade for him. Doesn't really do much, and then you lose him. You just kind of tossed away a couple prospects. I don't think that's one of them that's going to be a back-breaking move for the Padres when you look down the road. But I get having concerns about it, but overall, I think this is one of those moves where it's just like, hey, the Padres are all in. This is an organizational move to say we're building behind Tatis and we're trying to win right now. And I'm all for that, because growing up, I mean, and we're not very old. We're both 21. So we haven't seen a lot of bad Padres baseball, but growing up, you'd never see them really make that bold move. I feel like they did it with like Ryan Ludwig. That's been like the boldest deadline move I've seen them do. And Mike Clevenger as well last year. But in terms of the old Padres organization, they wouldn't go and push all the chips in for that championship. And I think this would be a move that really like just a statement move of we want to win this year. This is a year that the Padres, that our organization thinks that we have the best chance to win. We're going to go and we're going to do everything we can to build that team around Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, Trent Grisham, Yu Darvish, all these guys, because Padres have enough talent to do it, and I think this would definitely push them over the top.